My agenda here has nothing to do with being correct or providing advice, but rather to suss out potential ways of considering various topics and situations. Not here to make friends or inspire enemy combatants, though also not opposed to either. Correct me, criticize me, words still won't hurt me. That said, the zombie apocalypse is happening if you acknowledge how many people can rationalize their way out of a paper bag. Any cures provided happen naturally, and I'm not liable. Carry on, shall we? Howdy, humans. The topic I would like to discuss today could be triggering, and as with really any discussion I record that I have with myself is not extensive, but the bottom line of what I'd like to talk about is that pretty much any sort of okay, so there's lots of videos about how to find women and get them to date you is predatory. I don't think anybody really doesn't, I think it gets a pass quite easily as just a bunch of losers or however, who can't otherwise get women to want to date them. These are just tactics to get that to happen. So it's like this whole pickup artist scheming yuck fest. I'm not going to apologize for my sort of like rambling here because it just is such a disgusting, and I'm trying to overcome the disgust I have to even begin to discuss this. But I really obviously or not obviously, I have been on the receiving end of this type of behavior or attempts to behave in this way by men who come on to me, if you can even call it that. It just seems like a covert criminality of really sketchy behavior, because I don't think it's consensual. So the whole idea behind, training or not, if it executes the same way, it's one thing. So I'm not necessarily going to get into the whole training and the courses you can take to learn how to do this and all the videos and whatnot that are out there to teach people how to do these covert manipulative things, covertly manipulative. I could obviously do a whole thing on that as a market, which is it's teaching people to be criminals. I don't really see it. Obviously I've been traumatized by my experiences with the opposite sex and all of that. If speaking as a woman, if you've gotten out, if you've lived so far without having experienced this, say you got married and your husband is not someone, because of course I have to keep it in the framework of in the cis framework because I'm cis, but so I'm not trying to not include people, but I'm talking to my own experience. If you've gotten married, you feel very comfortable in your marriage, you're lucky. But I don't think many women have, I feel like if you believe you've not experienced this, you didn't notice yet. And ugh, this is such a difficult thing to talk about because I'm just, So I'm going to stop qualifying my comments here and just get into what I'm trying to point at. So training, figuring it out on your own, whatever. However these people end up doing this, and it can be either gender to any other gender, whatever. Again, I'm going to use the framework I have from my experience. The tactics are coercive, just as with any sales or any other thing. The point is to not present yourself as what you are. So you're masking that. You're trying to seem like you are something else, be it charming, likable, whatever, because most of the people who have to, I dare say all the people who have to employ these tactics is because they're not likable. So they have to pretend to be likable. So they're presenting things that they aren't. And you can try and tell me, well, you know, people, the prey of these predators don't necessarily disagree with what they're getting at, because I've seen it where the guy teaching the techniques is just like, well, some women like casual relationships, and that's fine. But if that's what the person wants, you don't have to pretend that that's not what you're doing, right? So a lot of the time it's, I'm this charming guy, I might be more interested in you than I obviously end up being, blah, blah, blah. The point isn't to care about your prey at all, it's to get what you want. What is okay about that? First, you can be a total piece of shit and still get what you want from somebody by pretending you're not a piece of shit, bottom line, right? So in that sense, you're removing the consent of the other person. I don't want to use the word, but isn't that non-consensual intimacy? If you're lying, so let's call it what it is, it's lying, deceiving somebody about who you are is a lie. Pick that apart if you want, but it is. It's dishonesty. Dishonesty is a lie. You know, you don't have to say, by the way, I'm pretending to be charming to make what you're doing on it. So you're pretending to be something that the person that you're coercing doesn't want to have anything to do with, to extract from them what you would like them to do for you. Isn't that like, aren't Ponzi schemes illegal? Isn't this the same thing? Obviously not. It's regarding different things, but the premise is the same, right? Like, just because it's not about finances doesn't mean the way that the person got what they want isn't the same false everything. So this person is participating in something they aren't willfully agreeing to. They're agreeing to something that's not true. So, isn't that date non-consensual intimacy? So, the difference to me, as far as I can, with the thoughts I've had about it, is like, okay, so the difference is that you've disguised your behavior in a way that makes it so that it can't be deemed an illegal activity, right? So if they didn't bother having any of the lead up, because there was some sort of interaction, the coercion had to happen. It didn't just, because if you just do the latter half of that equation, you go to jail. Or you should, because all of the kits that haven't been investigated, I mean, how legit that system even is in the first place is not also not what I'm trying to talk about here. Because how much anybody even cares about this. This is what my point is like, there's so many people in society that aren't deemed the worst of the worst because they can be the worst of the worst, but if their facade shows you something else, well, that's just okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter what the emotional consequences of people's behavior is, or because these people can do these things and somebody can end up becoming very depressed, maybe even wanting to discontinue their existence because they're so confused. There's so much gaslighting in that they can't, because they can't point to some specific thing, and because, well, somebody's mental health isn't, the infliction of the trigger to somebody's poor mental health isn't criminalized. I mean, what? I feel like I'm just all over the place and not necessarily saying any coherent sentences, but for cripe's sake, it's just, bad people can behave however they want because technically they didn't do anything illegal. Doesn't have to mean that they contributed anything but awful to society. I mean, that's fine. That's fine, because it's up to the person. You can say, well, the person who was the prey in the situation, they participated in that willingly. No, they didn't. That's what I'm trying to get at here is no, they didn't. So, we have, okay, don't like this person's name even, but, there were financial rewards given to people who've been duped by Trump College, whatever the real name of it was, Trump University. They could say, okay, I was promised this, I didn't get that. It's provable. There's like timeline and evidence that they didn't provide what the person financially contributed to them to obtain. So because there's no money involved, it's not the same thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm not suggesting I know what to do about this. I'm just saying there are lines drawn about, okay, let's not promote, people want to deplatform someone who's providing like fake news or false information. We're going to try to discourage that. That's known to be problematic and to make people behave in a certain way that is detrimental to them based on mistruths. This is the same thing. It's just harder to prove. And of course, that's why it would be difficult to even come up with a way to address this, but I feel as though this is empowering people. I feel like 80% of what happens in society these days is empowering awful people. This is one of them. These guys, because my situation, because it can be women as well, or whatever, these guys feel empowered by doing this. Just like the people who had irrational exuberance, which tell me it wasn't just cunning and not giving a shit about anybody else. The stock market and the whole financial collapse about a decade ago, you know, we just give them a pass because, well, they thought this and that was going to happen, and they were really excited. They got overconfident about it. No, they didn't. They knew what the fuck they were doing, and they did it anyway, and didn't care what the consequences were for other people, and they didn't get punished either. It's fine. It's just, you know, they made an error. Convince me that wasn't deliberate. It's just being narcissistic and not caring what the consequences are for the rest of the world. And this is the same shit. Like, oh, we're teaching guys how to not be alone by manipulating other women. And so then the point is, you know, well, there's so many defensive women that this has to be taught to guys to get around the defenses. That it clearly says what I'm saying. But why are women defensive in the first place? You know, jumping, you know, past the conversation I've tried to already have, or discussion I've already tried to have here. Why are women like that? Why are women so disgusted by men? Because they do this shit. So let's keep teaching them to do that instead of ever addressing the fact that you have a shitty personality and that nobody wants to be around you because you're awful. You're manipulative, and all you want to do is take from people. And somebody picks up on that and realizes it and doesn't want anything to do with it. So let's create a loophole. What isn't criminal about that? What isn't... So I'll say this, and maybe this should be where I end, because I don't know how clear I'm being, and as much of my point that can be made has been attempted to be stated already. There's nothing funny about this. So if a man, well, I guess if they're narcissistic or whatever, it wouldn't matter, but they intellectually should comprehend that this would matter. And I don't think socially they would say that this wouldn't matter. So a man who's either perpetuating the pickup artist bull crap, or the person who's acting on these techniques. If this was done to their child, their own son or daughter, if somebody used techniques to coerce them, wouldn't they be mad about that? Wouldn't they want to go, like, maybe even hurt somebody for doing that? Wouldn't they want justice for maybe even losing their child due to the mental stress of this repeatedly happening to them? Just like, I mean, it's the same idea of, oh, all these conservative people who realize, oh my gosh, I know decent people who aren't straight. I realize they deserve to have rights. I feel 100% convinced that no one deserves to be coerced into a sexual act with another person and that be socially acceptable, but it is. I'm really just getting irritated that I don't feel very articulate right now. I can't believe, I mean, it's even, there are lots of videos making fun of these people, like incels and whatnot. It's just all so demented that somebody's, because your body is like as intimate a thing as there can be, right? And somebody violates your physical form in a way that you can't rationalize because you were coerced, leaves you in a not great state of mind. But let's just keep letting people teach people to do this shit. I'm done. I can't. It's over. I'm done.